Chapter 93, Great Courage. It's raining in winter, and the wind is blowing. There weren't many pedestrians on the streets, so it was even more deserted. There are few people in the various markets in Beijing, and the owners and men of the shops look at the sky in vain and sigh. But not long after, at the end of the silent street, there was the sound of horses' hooves, which were heavily connected and mixed with the sound of shouting, and in a few moments a general in armor with a grey beard sat high on his horse, and led a cadre of cavalry to run through the streets, only to the place where the forbidden army was stationed at the gate of the capital. Everyone was terrified. After the group of slaughtered people left the street, the owners of the shop dared to sigh, but they were all terrified. What is going on? The tighter the wind, the more cloudy the sky became. The rain that fell quickly turned into snow, and the first snow of the winter finally fell.
星号
Sometimes Zhang Xuning thinks about it. After all, God still left some mercy for her. At least let her meet Zhang Sha again. She walked around the waterside and soon reached the antechamber. A small amount of fine snow fell from the sky, and she only felt a little sigh when she saw it. Zhang Sha's favorite thing is rain, and now that it has turned into snow, shouldn't he be happy? The lobby was packed. She also wanted to go straight to the table. However, when he walked to the corner of the veranda in front of him, he saw Zhang Boyu, who seemed to be talking to his colleagues in the court. Today, Yan Ling Guanli, some officials in the DPRK and China also ventured to come. Zhang Boyu is naturally one of them. He was wearing a round-necked robe with a stone blue beifa pattern, standing with another person under the pine tree planted in the courtyard. His brows were tightly locked. Listening to the man's words, he couldn't help but shake his head. It's okay to offend other families, but it's a little difficult to offend the Xiao Ergongzi, and this Zheng family is really pitiful. The man sighed, who said no, everyone here in Zishikao knows the Zheng family, and I heard that there is also a son who was sent to the palace as an errand, although it is not a wealthy family, but the life of the little people is not bad. But when he encountered the Xiao family, he dominated people's fields and property, forced people to move their ancestral graves, and wanted to send people's families to prison, which was a bit miserable. As soon as he finished speaking, he looked up and saw Zhang Xuning. So he swallowed the rest of the words back, and smiled at Zhang Boyu and said, Lord Shilang has been talking for a long time before. No, Ling Ai has also arrived. Zhang Boyu turned his head and saw Zhang Xuning. His originally tightly knit brows opened up a little, and he arched his hand with that colleague, slightly apologetic, and the colleague didn't mind, so he also arched his hand to Zhang Xuning and went into the hall. Zhang Xuning heard only a few words when she came over. She stepped forward to salute Uncle Zhang, but she couldn't help asking, when my father was talking to someone just now, he mentioned the Zheng family in Hekaotong in Zishi. Zhang Boyu said, exactly, what, do you know? He remembered that there was indeed a person in the Zheng family who was on an errand in the palace, and his heart moved, so he asked more. Zhang Xuning remembered Zheng Bao, because Zheng Bao was the chief eunuch of the palm seal of the celebrant in the previous life, and where he lived was naturally known to everyone in the government and the opposition. She hasn't forgotten the words Zishikao Huatong. Hearing Zhang Boyu's affirmation, she kept an eye on it. If there was no Zheng Bao in the siege of Yangzhizai last time, she was afraid that it would be too difficult, so she said to Zhang Boyu, this family is most likely the family of Zheng Bao, a steward eunuch who served in Kunning Palace. Later, Mr. Xie told his daughter that Wang Xinyi, the master of ceremonies, had the intention of accepting him as an apprentice, and he would soon be promoted to serve by the saint's side. When she said the second half of the sentence, although there was no one around, her voice was still much lowered, and only Zhang Boyu could hear it. Zheng Bao was accepted by Wang Xinyi as an apprentice to serve in the celebrant supervisor. Of course Zhang Xuning didn't know about it from Xie Wei, and Xie Wei didn't specifically want to inform her about it, but this did not prevent her from dragging Xie Wei out for temporary use. Sure enough, as soon as she said the matter, Zhang Boyo's face changed slightly. People who have been in the officialdom for a long time have always heard the strings and songs and know the elegant meaning, and they don't need to speak deeply, they can understand the meaning hidden behind the words. This Zheng family offended the Xiao family, who was determined to inherit the family business, Xiao Ye's son. In fact, it was not the fault of the Zheng family, but because Xiao Ye took a fancy to a mountain and the land below when he traveled outside Beijing, and wanted to encircle his own hunting ground and build a summer resort Bipu, so he drove out the surrounding people. The Zheng family's ancestral grave and land are right there. I thought that I could reason with the Xiao family, but I didn't want to sue the Yamen, but Xiao Ye was furious, and he wanted to send the Zheng family into the Yamen instead. It was Shuntian Manchunyin who spoke to Zhang Boyo just now. Such a thing fell on his hands, it was really a hot potato, and it was only then that he poured bitter water on Zhang Boyo. Now is an eventful time, for civil and military officials, it is better to have more than one thing, and the same is true for Zhang Boyo. But if this Zhang Bao is kind to Ning in the palace, and Xiejuan Xiao says that this person has a great future, things will be different. He wrinkled his eyebrows in thought. At the end, he said to Zhang Xuning, I know about this matter, don't worry. The crown ceremony was about to arrive, and everyone went in. Zhang Boyo said, you are here with Her Royal Highness the eldest princess, right? Let's go in quickly. Zhang Xuning knew that Zhang Boyo should have an idea, but she didn't ask much, just said yes, and then followed Zhang Boyo into the hall. Even if the Yanji Marquis mansion was not in its heyday, this hall was also full of well-dressed guests, and at a glance inside, you could see Xie Wei sitting in the guest of honor, and next to him was the praiser who would crown Yan Lin today. Zhang Xuning glanced at it hurriedly, and half of them were familiar faces. In the previous life, many families who were originally close to the home mansion of Yanji did not arrive after receiving the invitation of the home mansion, and later Yan Lin returned to the court. Xie Wei rebelled. These families were either liquidated and eradicated together, or withdrew from the dispute and dispersed to the edge of power. The matter of loyalty to the monarch and condemned Yan Lin for assisting Xie Wei in his rebellion did not attract any retaliation, even if he did not catch any big officials. He was safe and sound. Sometimes things in the world are like this, sometimes you want to avoid disaster, but you don't know that avoiding disaster will lead to real disaster, and sometimes you want to get it, but you don't know that getting it is a deeper loss. After Shen Zai and the others arrived, they didn't see Zhang Xuning left and right, and they were still a little anxious, and when they saw her come in, they hurriedly beckoned, Ning Ning, this way. Zhang Xuning walked over. Although the defense of men and women in the Great Jian dynasty was not so serious, the general men's crown ceremony was basically not seen by female guests except for the elders. But Shen Zai, the eldest princess of Liang, has a noble status after all, and she and Yan Lin can be regarded as friends who grew up together, so she can naturally attend the hall, and her position is still very high. These companions in the palace are stained with her light, and they are located nearby. Zhang Xuning was even pulled by Shen Zai and sat directly beside her. Someone knocked lightly on a small bronze bell in the hall, and the surroundings immediately fell silent. All eyes were on the hall for a moment. Wearing a heavy costume, Ho Yan Mua, who was brave and resolute, walked out of the back hall with the support of the old housekeeper. Everyone hurriedly saluted when they saw it, although Yan Mu had a sick look on his face, but on such a festive day today, he couldn't help but cheer up, and he had a bit of the courage of his youth, and even laughed after returning the salute. Thanks to all the guests who can afford to come here, my home mansion is really full of brilliance. His gaze fell on the black and oppressive people in this hall, but there was a bit of old joy in his sharp eyes. Yan Mu has been busy in vain for 45 years, walking on the battlefield and going to Luntai. I don't want to be a little older, but I am sick, so everyone laughs at it. Today's wind and snow are cold, but you cannot give up, give me enough dignity as a half-old man, and also give enough dignity to dogs. Yanmu will always remember it, thank you here. After that, he actually stretched out. Is talking about today's wind and snow cold, not mentioning the difficulties faced by the current court situation and the home mansion, but everyone easily heard the meaning of the words. Thinking of the loyalty of the Marquis of Yanji, Yanmu also led the troops to fight and expelled the Tartars when he was young, but now he was ordered by the saint to besiege the mansion with heavy troops, and the sword hung on his neck. I don't know, which is really embarrassing. How can everyone afford such a big gift? For a while, they were busy saying Hoya is serious and Hoya can't, and returned it with a deep courtesy. This is the official beginning of the crown ceremony. The entire vestibule is arranged in a way that resembles an ancestral hall. Yanlin wore a new plain robe, walked in from outside the hall according to the ancient rites, first knocked on the heavens and the earth, then sacrificed to the temple, and then worshipped his parents, and the praiser attended the prayer and reading the blessing speech, and then performed the crowning ceremony. Scholar Sangha. Yanlin opened his hands, letting the heavy dark coat drape over his shoulders, enveloping him heavily, and the wide leather belt also passed through his waist through the hand of the praiser, and a round jade pendant engraved with the Ruyi pattern was tied on the leather belt, hanging low and pressing the hem of the clothes. He bowed and bowed again. The praiser shouted, 3+ crowns, please Dabin. The most important thing is to crown the crown. The guest of honor in the crown ceremony, also known as the big guest, is often a person of high moral respect, who not only personally crowns the crowned person, but also takes the word for the crowned person. As soon as the praiser's voice came out, everyone's eyes fell on Siewei. According to the courtesy, the guests should be dressed. But today's Siewei not only wore a full dress, but even only wore a snow-white robe, covered with a white crane cloud pattern coat, wide robe, and large sleeves, and had a fluttering and elegant state, which was quite incompatible with today's grand ceremony and everyone's dress. However, the host family did not say a word. Yanmu also looked at Siewei. Siewei watched in silence for a long time, and finally lowered his eyes at this moment, got up slightly, and stepped forward. Yanlin raised his eyes to look at him, turned sideways and stood towards him. The people in the house handed over the lacquer plate with the crown on the end, and the praiser served it, and stood beside Siewei with his head bowed. The crown of the hair is carved from white jade, 3 inches long, 1.5 inches high, the crown is rolled backwards, 6 beams are pressed and seamed, quietly placed in the lacquer plate, the sky shines, simple and clear, there is an ancient relic style. A pair of simple wooden hairpins are placed next to the crown. The golden crown is mostly equipped with hostas, and the jade crown is mostly equipped with wooden hairpins, the former is rich and luxurious, but the latter shows a bit of clarity. It can be seen how the family motto of the Marquis of Yanji is. Siewei said, the crown, the beginning of the ceremony. And the adult, who is the son of man, the younger brother, and the lesser, first filial piety, younger brother, and obedience, can be a person, and then govern people. I am invited by the commander to crown you, and I sincerely hope that the Son of the World will remember today's precepts. He took the jade crown from the lacquer plate. Yanlin lifted his robe and knelt in front of him. Everyone's attention was on Siewei's hand, but they rarely paid attention to what he said. After all, the congratulatory speech at the crown ceremony was always the same. However, Zhang Xuning, who was standing below to watch the ceremony, listened to it, but her heart jumped. Less. Siewei said less congratulatory messages. In the Book of Rites, it is said that adults should be sons of men, brothers, ministers, and young people, and what they want to do is filial piety, brother, loyalty, and obedience, but Siewei only said that he was a son of man, a brother, and a man, but he did not say to be a minister, let alone mention half of the word loyalty. Yanlin also raised his head at this moment, and his sharp and cold gaze stabbed straight into Xiaowei's face. Xiaowei lowered his eyes and put the jade crown on top of Yan Lin's head, and said to him calmly, "Bow your head." Yan Lin's heart was surging like a river. Some were surprised, some were shocked, but at this time, he didn't dare to show half a point, and after looking at him for a while, he finally bowed his head according to his words. The praiser then handed the hairpin to him. Xiaowei took it. But just as he was about to put the wooden hairpin through the jade crown to tie Yan Lin's hair, there was a sudden noise of swords and soldiers outside the Yanji Ho's mansion, and there seemed to be a guard from the Ho mansion at the door shouting, "What are you doing?" And then it came to an abrupt end, followed by an exclamation and screaming, and a person shouted coldly, "There is a decree in the Holy Spirit, the Yanji Houfa colluded with the rebels, intended to rebel, and instigated a mutiny in the army, and now it will be punished as a chaotic minister and thief. All the people of the Ho's mansion will be arrested, and those who dare to resist will be killed." What? All the guests in the hall were shocked, and most of them panicked and looked outside. Yanji Ho Yanmu was even more shocked, and suddenly got up. The snow outside had already risen at some point, and a group of soldiers with swords in their arms glowed with a cold light, and they directly looked at the guards blocking the door, stepped into the gate of the mansion with heavy and solemn steps, and walked towards the front hall. The person who led the troops looked like Sen Ran. It was Xiao Yuan, the Duke of Dingguo. Zhang Xuaning's fingers clasped in her sleeves couldn't help but tremble, and the bloody scenes she had seen at the gate of the Ho mansion in her previous life seemed to come up from the bottom of her vision, making her feel like she was in an ice cave. Everyone knows that the future of the Yanji Marquis mansion is uncertain, and it is in danger, and something may happen at any time. But there is nothing to say in the Yanling Guanli Palace today. It should have been acquiesced by the saint. No one thought that the saint would choose to do it today, and the person who led the people to come was Xiao Yuan, the famous Dingguo Gong of the Xiao family. All of a sudden, almost everyone was distracted. Yan Mu's old eyes stared at Xiao Yuan who was approaching. Yan Lin's pupils shrank even more, and he was about to get up suddenly, but a hand fell heavily at this moment, pressing his shoulder. He looked up. It was Xiaowei's palm that pressed his shoulder tightly, choking the hot blood that suddenly rushed up his head, but from this upward angle, he couldn't clearly distinguish the other party's expression. He only felt calm as the deep sea, and he couldn't see half of the waves, but there was a clear perception on his shoulder, the 5 fingers that pressed him, the force was tight, and the fingertips were almost deep into his flesh. Xiaowei blinked slightly, as if he couldn't see the earth-shattering change or hear the terrifying movement, and his gaze still fell on the crown. After holding down Yan Lin, he raised his hand again and held the jade crown. The wooden hairpin held between his slender fingers, slowly turned, penetrated into the hole at the bottom of the jade crown. The calmness between his eyebrows was like a green mountain dyed with rain, and the seclusion added a bit of solemnity, and only said quietly, "Heroic people, the festival will be passable. Draw your sword and stand up and fight. This is a humiliation for the horseman, and he is not surprised when he dies, and he is not angry for no reason, so he is called the great brave man in the world. The son of the world is not shocked, and he is not angry.